couldn't see, yeah?
Wait, so could nobody see that until I click go live and I've just done that whole thing?
Now you're live. Here we cat
Right,
said
so
yes.
can I just confirm nobody saw any of that? Could
Well, we
some
saw it. I saw all of that, but did anyone in the group see it?
So I actually think we've
Only started.
right,
Okay.
guys. So I just had a little bit of a prep where I went through the whole start with
Timmy
apparently
and Tony.
just the coaches. So that's great. Okay, well, guys, I'm so excited to have you here. I'll try and do that as enthusiastically as I did before. That was okay, right. I'm going to remove Maureen now. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Sorry, I just did the start of this to nobody. But you know, the whole mantra of imperfect action, like this is absolutely my style. And here we are doing it imperfectly. So I will go over this again. Welcome to the No Bullshit Fat Loss Seminar. I am so pleased that you're here. I really wanted to get people together to actually help people. So away from Instagram, where things really need to be quite clickbaity, where there's a hell of a lot of misinformation, and somewhere where actually you can ask questions, where we can go back and forward a little bit, and where you're going to get a ton of value. So what I really want over the next hour or so is for you guys to ask questions, to get involved, to ask questions and get involved and really get the most out of this. So not like the normal, what I've just been through, which is that you probably all hear me on podcasts talking at you. What I really want is for you guys to ask questions back and this to be a really, really useful workshop and not webinar, right? So not just me lecturing at you here. I really want this to be interactive. So the way that this is going to work and the breakdown that I have here, by the way, these topics were really, really hard to identify because there's so much that I could go over, and I have gone on a few tangents here in my usual style, which I hope will be really useful to people. But I thought I'd just pick a few things and go over them carefully rather than try and cover everything and then essentially not really cover anything that useful. So I've picked what I think is the most useful and what comes up the most often. So things like, how do I know what my calories are? And what changes do I need to make during menopause? And you know what, like, how do I know, I know what to do but I'm just not doing it. These kind of things, like these are like the key problems that we help our clients with. So I'm hoping that this will help as many people as possible. The way that I'm going to structure this, and this is the first time I've done a workshop like this, and my idea is, if this is really good and helpful and I get good feedback from it, that I will do these more frequently. And again, try and kind of like actually help people rather than just talk at them in clickbaity short content on Instagram, which isn't particularly useful and isn't related to you as an individual, which means that sometimes really good advice for one person could be absolutely horrendous advice for somebody else, right? And there always needs to be a bit of nuance to these messages or messaging. So what I'm going to set up here, or like the structure that we're going to do today, is maybe like 5 to 8, I don't know why that was so specific, 5 to 8 minutes of me talking about something. And then Maureen's going to come in, collate some of the questions from the thread, and then we're going to go through them and kind of talk back and forward. So just to start, so we all know that why you're here. This is where I got to before I realized that nobody was here. Yeah, just before we start, could you tell me in the comments your main goal and what you want to get from this workshop? Because I think it's going to be really useful. So just comment away there. Has it gone or is it just me? Hopefully it's not gone. Okay, well, I hope it's working for people. Okay, great. Fat loss, perimenopausal and can't lose weight. Perfect. You're going to love this. To look better and feel confident. Freaking love that. A bit of a reset. Again, love that vibe. Stop boycotting myself. Oh, interesting. Quite like that frame. I would like to stick to my goal of fat loss, wanting to lose fat. Okay, cool. Like, I'm also loving that there's a lot of perimenopausal women in here, because I did go on a very big perimenopause tangent. So I'm very glad that that's in here. It'll still be relevant to everybody, but that's incoming. Okay, so Maureen's going to look through a few of those and I will move on here. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to cover is setting targets, because I think that this is probably the most common question that I get. How do I know what my calories should be? And there's a few brief points I want to make on this. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. If you want to talk to me after, because this is so specific to individuals about your targets, then do reach out to me. Now, and if you've already signed up to Commit 6, which I know a lot of people here already have, we are going to set your range targets for you. But a few points I want to make is that calorie targets are not a magic number. Anything below your maintenance needs, which here I've kind of put in a really simple way, which is the total calories that you burn in a day, right? And that is composed of, like, now you can use the technical terms of like total daily energy expenditure and non-exercise activity thermogenesis, but if we keep it really, really simple, instead of basal metabolic rate, that's just the calories you need to stay alive, okay? Then you've got a small amount that's going to come from exercise if you are exercising. You've got some that comes from actually the digestion of food and the heat, the byproducts of heat that's produced from breaking down food. And then you have some that comes from daily movement as well, or non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So you have this composition of how much energy you expend during a day. Now, if you consume less energy than how much energy you expend during the day, you are in a deficit and you will lose fat. You will lose that stored energy. Now, the size of that deficit matters, right? So quite a sensible target to go for is about a 10 to 20% deficit. It's normally quite a good aim. Now, obviously, if you're closer to the 20%, you're going to lose fat faster, in theory, right? Because you also need to adhere to it. And one thing that most people get wrong about this is they really focus on intensity of the deficit, i.e., how can I just create a bigger deficit and lose fat quicker, rather than the consistency. And I was speaking to a friend about this on the weekend, and and I think a lot of people fall into this mindset. I certainly have this mindset as well, right? I kind of need to move away from it a little bit. But he was taking some medication to go through some treatment, right? And he had to take this medication twice a day. And he was like, I wonder if I took it 4 times a day, if I could just get through it like quicker, and I just get like the outcome quicker. And it's just not how it works, right? Recovery doesn't work like that. Neither does fat loss. You need both, like, the consistency and the time to recover from it, and the time to actually lose the fat. You have to pace yourself. And one of the best analogies for this is thinking about the fastest marathon time, right? The fastest marathon time comes from proper pacing. And so does the most successful fat loss. So much like with the marathon, some people will be able to run faster than others. Yeah, for sure, some people will be able to drop their calories slightly lower than others. One thing that has really helped our clients is using range targets. And this avoids this kind of all or nothing thinking, because a lot of the time when you set someone a calorie target, as soon as they go over it, they think, well, I've absolutely screwed it up. Like as soon as, and this is where I really want to make the point I was trying to make at the start, and then I've got slightly distracted by myself. Your maintenance needs might be, let's just say, for example, for easy maths for me, they're 2,000, right? And you've got a fat loss target of 1,500 calories. What tends to happen is if someone goes to like 1,600 calories, they're like, I've gone over my calories today and I've absolutely ruined it. May as well continue to overeat. Might not even get back on track tomorrow, right? I feel like I've ruined my whole week because of this. When in fact, you were still in a 400 calorie deficit. You would have still lost fat that day, right? And to avoid this kind of all or nothing thinking, which is such a simple concept when you lay it out like that, but is often what's tripping people up. To avoid that, we use these range targets, right? So we will set your range targets based on just normally a little bit below your maintenance to what we would define as like optimal fat loss. So you have this range to stay within. Now, if you're in that range, you are moving forward. There might be some days you're at towards the bottom of that range, and when you're towards the bottom of that range, you will lose fat quicker. And there may be some days or some weeks that you're more towards the top of that range. But the point is, every single day, you are finishing the day closer to that target, right? And it avoids this all or nothing, black and white, on off kind of thinking. And it also avoids the kind of over restriction and then overindulgence cycle. So it's quite a simple concept, but when applied properly, it works extremely well. And another thing I want to say about this, and I stole this from a really brilliant marketer called Rory Sutherland, is that he made this observation that people don't mind waiting so much when the experience is nice, right? One of the key barriers that people say that they have to fat loss is I'm impatient. But if you think about a 10-hour flight in business class, you probably don't mind the 10 hours, right? You think about a 10-hour flight in economy with screaming babies all around you and, I don't know, a massive queue to the bathroom all the time. Like, that's a pretty long flight. It's the same 10 hours, but it feels very different, right? This is exactly the same with your fat loss journey. A miserable 6 weeks of dieting will feel like an eternity, and you will be waiting till that end point. And when there's an end point, inevitably you end up regaining that weight. Whereas 6 weeks of Commit to Six or another incredible program, right, will fly by because you'll be feeling great. You'll be living your life while you're getting results. You're not putting your life on hold for fat loss, but equally, you're not putting fat loss on hold for your life, right? And this happens from both perspectives. Either people try and stick to a very restrictive diet and then don't go out with their family, don't eat with their friends, all these things pop up. Or on the other end of the spectrum, they're like, oh, I've got a holiday. I'll wait till I come back to lose fat. Or I've got a busy period of time. I'll wait until that's done, which inevitably never happens, right? Because we're always all really busy. So you're always putting something on hold. The whole point of the way that we coach and the way that, you're going to get long-term results is not putting anything on hold, right? So you don't resent the process. So that's range targets. I'm going to quickly stop here to see if anyone has any questions about
So somebody has asked, how do we set range targets?
Okay, so one, we will set them for you if you're working with us. If not, what you want to do is kind of estimate roughly how much energy you're expending, right? And calorie targets are not, calorie calculators are not perfect, but they're not a bad place to start. So you're probably going to get a rough estimate of your total daily energy expenditure. And then, as I said, you could take 10 to 20% off that. You would probably think about how much fat you have to lose. Like a 20% deficit could be quite big for some people, quite small for others. And then you want to have that range between about a 20% deficit and just below your maintenance target that you'd always be staying in.
So Lisa's just asking there, what is the best place to go /app to set range targets? What about a TDEE calculator? So that's kind of what Emma's talking about now. You can find one of them online, but just know that the calories that you'll get might be your maintenance calories, and then you will have to take from that.
Yeah, the calories that you should get from a total daily energy, from a calorie calculator, will be hopefully your maintenance calories. What tends to trip people up is that then they say something like, I'd like to lose fat really quickly because why not? And then they put you in this ridiculous deficit, which you can't stick to, or they give you an exact calorie target. And then you have this on-off mentality. So even if you are using calorie targets and say it comes out with you need to be eating, 1,500 calories to be in a fat loss deficit, see that as a range between, okay, well, I know that I'm burning about 2,000 and my optimal deficit calories might be 1,500. If I'm anywhere in between that range, still in a deficit and I'm still losing fat.
So there's a question there saying my fitness pal is saying 1,200, but my gym says 1,690.
Yeah, and this is why it becomes such a problem when we get so many questions about this. And I'm going to be completely honest, because that's, it's no bullshit fat loss and I want to help you, right? A lot of this is user error. The reason that you got 1,200, whatever it is, 1,200 calories on MyFitnessPal is because you said you wanted to lose fat really quickly, right? Which I get. Who doesn't? Why would you want to wait for results? But because you said that, it's put you in a big deficit, one that is probably not maintainable, right? It's very hard to stick to 1,200 calories with having any kind of life and any kind of flexibility.
Another question is, somebody has said they can only lose weight on Slimming World. Slimming World?
I mean, that would probably be better.
That would be fun, wouldn't it? But never on a calorie deficit.
Yeah, if you're losing weight, you are 100% in a calorie deficit, right? So what's happening on Swimming World or Slimming World is that you're creating a calorie deficit. Now, you don't have to track calories to create a deficit. And I'm actually going to come on to one of the ways that we help people lose fat. And actually, a lot of our Commit to Six clients do this. I do it as well without tracking calories. So you don't have to track calories to be at a deficit. But if you're losing weight, you are in a deficit. Whether you're fasting to create that deficit, whether you're doing Slimming World, whether you're cutting out carbs, whatever it might be.
There was a question there that I wanted to mention. Oh, so confused whether to do calorie counting or intuitive eating.
Well, they're quite different. Yeah. So it depends. Well, one, what's your goal? Because if your goal is fat loss and you're expecting to lose fat by eating intuitively and assuming that by eating intuitively you mean eating in relation to your hunger signals, you will not lose fat because most of us are driven to eat more than what we need. So and my second point being, intuitive eating is not a fat loss diet. Like, by kind of very definition, by trying to lose fat and maintain a deficit, you're going against your natural intuition. So your natural hunger levels. Like, if you want to lose fat, you're probably going to be a little bit hungry at times because you're in a deficit. You're eating less calories than you've expended that day. Anything to add on that?
No, agree. There's a few questions asking about thoughts on fasting.
I did see this one here, alternate day fasting. That I wouldn't suggest that. That's usually quite extreme. For some people it can work, right? And this is why I really wanted to do these kind of workshops where we can go back and forward and we can discuss a bit of the nuance. And I'm going to let Maureen talk on this here as well, because something that we struggle with a lot with women is binge eating. And this is something Maureen specializes in. And fasting would be the last thing that you should be doing, right? What tends to happen with fasting, and like I say, not for everyone, but honestly, like if you're realistic with yourself and you know yourself well enough, and you look at yourself in a non-judgmental way, and you're like, okay, when I do fast, I do tend to overeat. Some people don't. Some people fast and then they kind of eat normally in between those times. That's great, but it's actually not the norm. Normally what happens is when you push something to one extreme, i.e. not eating very much at all, then it swings back to the other extreme, i.e. eating a hell of a lot. Do you have anything to add on that? Just to kind of like, okay, who should fast, who shouldn't fast, pros and cons?
Yeah. So the thing about fasting is, like, it's not that it's a one, like it's just a magic thing that's going to help you lose weight. Like Emma has said, like, some people will be able to manage it fine, but a lot of people can't. A lot of people get really hungry and they might fast all day, and then in the evening time just cannot possibly stop eating, and they blame themselves for not having enough willpower or enough discipline. But it's actually, you're just fucking hungry, because you didn't eat anything all day. So that's generally what happens is people, or you'll get a lot of people who struggle really, really bad with overeating in the evening and think, oh, well, I'm not actually hungry during the day. I get really hungry in the evening, so I actually think it's better for me to save my calories for the evening time. But the reason you're not hungry in the day is because you have trained yourself not to eat at that time. And then in the evening time, your hunger has actually caught up with you and now has smacked you across the face, and you are struggling to control yourself around food because you just feel like you're insatiable at that time and you just want to eat everything before and behind you. But if you actually ate more regular throughout the day instead of fasting, you would find that you wouldn't have these massive hunger pangs, and you would feel a lot more regulated and be a lot more consistent with your eating, which would actually then in turn help you with your fat loss goals.
I agree. And the reason that I brought this up is because it kind of like emphasizes your point here of, people think that they're the problem, or like, oh, I always overeat in the evening. It's like, well, look at what you're doing in the day. Of course you overeat. And this is like, I can go no carbs, but as soon as I eat carbs, I binge. Why do you think you're binging? because you've restricted the carbs, you know? Like if they weren't restricted, you wouldn't be binging on them, right? If you didn't have this mentality around them, if you hadn't, you know, put them like off plan and like not allowed, then like as soon as you start doing that, then the psychology is when you do eat them, oh, I've messed everything up. And then you end up overeating them, right? Like it's the restriction that causes the overeating. And what's hard about that is it's quite hard to get out of that mentality, like because it's quite hard to break that, especially with oh, perfect. Sorry, I don't know why now. I don't know how to get rid of these. Anyway, they're quite cool that they're coming up. Yeah, it's hard to get out of that cycle because usually what's happening is you overeat in the evening and then you think, well, tomorrow I'll restrict a bit to make up for that. And then you end up in this cycle and it's hard to get out of. But what you need to do is focus on not over restricting the next day. So there will be a few days where you're like, I did overeat and I'm not over restricting. I know my calories are higher short term, but that's going to stop that cycle long term. Okay, shall I try and how do I now get rid of these? Hide. Okay, right. I'm going to go on quickly to the next bit. We will come back to these questions. What I think I might do, because I think it would be useful to people, is move on to the perimenopause part and then come back to some questions. So keep the questions coming. Maureen will keep on top of them. And by the way, all of these we'll try and answer afterwards as well to make sure that you are all as helped as you possibly can be. Right. So this is part I really wanted to talk about, mainly because I woke up this morning and I was just really excited to talk about perimenopause. So I think this is going to help a lot of people. One of the main questions that we get around perimenopause is, you know, why is fat loss so much harder? And this is probably the part now I am also accepting that I probably see a lot of this and I am sensitive to a lot of it because it's so many of the women that I work with, but there is so much misinformation around menopause and you are targeted so heavily with misinformation or with, I don't know, like fat loss for menopause or supplements or like targeted so much. So I really wanted to cover this and kind of talk through what is different and what isn't different. Fun fact, this image was made with AI. It's not even a real person, which I think is really cool. But the reason I wanted this image is because it reminds me of an analogy that I want to talk about. And a lot of people will say one of two things. Either fat loss is completely different during menopause. You need to do this. You need to buy my supplement. You need to take this approach. You need to do this special plan, whatever. That's not true. And on the other side, people will say fat loss and building muscle is exactly the same during menopause. You don't need to change anything. Neither of those are true, right? The process might be the same. And this is where the analogy comes in. So it's like saying it's exactly the same to walk along the street. There's one step in front of the other. Walking is the same as it is to climb Mount Everest with a massive backpack on. Like you're still doing one step in front of the other. That part is true, but it's significantly harder when you have a hell of a lot more going on. So I'm not just going to talk about the symptoms, which is one of the main things that happens during perimenopause that makes fat loss significantly harder, but also the physiological impacts of reduced estrogen. So one of the key things that happens when estrogen levels drop during perimenopause is that you have an impaired ability to build muscle. And why is muscle so important? Well, partly because you will live I was going to say happier. I'm willing to bet happier, but definitely longer, healthier life with a higher quality of life. So this study showed that the more muscle that you have, as you can see from these graphs or these bars, the more muscle you have, the less likely you are to die of any cause, right? That's what all-cause mortality means. And so basically this graph shows that you want to build as much muscle as possible. So that's why it's important. Second point I want to make is that resistance training is very important, especially for menopausal women. So menopausal women have an increased risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and cancer, as well as a reduction in muscle mass, bone mineral density, and mood. And the magic of resistance training is that it has the opposite effect of some of these negatives, right? So it mitigates some of the negatives of the reduction in estrogen that you see going through menopause. So it reduces your risk of cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes and certain forms of cancer. And it increases bone mineral density and muscle mass and mood, right? So it's one of the best things that you can be doing at any stage of life, but especially at this stage of life. Now, this might look like a little bit of a complicated graph. I am going to talk through it, and hopefully like the next sort of 2 minutes, stay with me on this, right? I'm a bit of a geek, but I think it's really interesting, and hopefully it will help you understand what's happening on a physiological level. So it's harder to build muscle and recover from exercise when estrogen levels drop during menopause. And there are various reasons for this. So some of them are like more, I guess, like surface level, like the impact of symptoms like sleep impairment, like reduced sleep, and then not being able to recover as well. But I really want to focus on the physiology here. And before I explain this, I just need to briefly explain how you build muscle, or just maybe a bit of a recap for people. So when you exercise, you create these small tears in your muscle, and this stimulates inflammation and also some growth hormones, and it activates cells called satellite cells. And this is what allows your muscle to grow and repair from a training stimulus or like from injury, right? So if you're injured, the same sort of process happens. And just briefly touch on this. So when I put this in, I was like, wow, I've gone on quite a big tangent. But anyway, just quickly, a satellite cell is like a stem cell for your muscle. And these cells fuse to the muscle fiber to replace these like damaged portions that you've damaged, which is part of what you want to do with resistance training, like create those small little tears. And that's what allows growth and repair. And as a little side note to this, if you're ever thinking like how muscle memory works, it's due to this as well, right? So the reason that if you, I don't know, trained for a year, built a load of muscle, and then for some reason you couldn't train for a year, and then you went back and you started training again, that second time that you start training, you will build muscle much quicker than the first time because you don't lose all of these satellite cells. Another side note, which I think is really interesting and maybe is timely because the Olympics has just been on, the performance enhancement that you get from taking anabolic steroids stays with you far longer than like the bans that are given in athletics and things. And it's partly because of this, right? You're able to train harder. If you're able to have more satellite cells, then even if you were caught taking drugs and then you weren't taking drugs and you came back from a ban, you actually still have a lot of the benefit of the training that you've been doing on anabolic steroids. Not quite relevant to what we're talking about. So back to my point about menopause. When estrogen levels drop, this satellite function is reduced. So the low that impacts how much muscle you can build and how easy it is also to maintain your muscle. So it makes it harder to build and maintain muscle, which is why it's even more important to do so, right? So if you kind of go through step by step here, the reduction in anabolic hormones, specifically estrogen and testosterone, results in a reduction in satellite cells. And then you also have an increase in intramuscular fat storage, and it just becomes a harder environment in which to build muscle. So what do you do about that, right? And you don't necessarily need to do so much different, right? Much like with fat loss, the same principles apply to build muscle. But one thing that you do want to think about is quite a simple concept called maximal recoverable volume, right? What's the amount of training that you can actually adapt and recover to, or from even? And this is influenced by various things. So fitness, as an example, you know, some people are like, how does so-and-so train numerous times a day and still recover? They're normally really fit, right? They've trained up to get to that level. Someone doesn't just start CrossFit and start training twice a day. They would never recover from that. They start training 3 times a week, and then they manage 4 and then 5, and then maybe they are training twice a day if they're, you know, at that elite level. Second thing, sleep. Obviously, one of the key things that's impacted during menopause or perimenopause, especially with symptoms. Your nutrition, absolutely. Okay, like, are you actually fueling yourself to recover from exercise? Now, if you're in a deficit and you're not prioritizing protein and you're maybe in too big a deficit, then actually your ability to adapt and recover from exercise is also impacted. Your stress levels, that has an impact as well. And then, as we've just been talking about, this reduction in estrogen. So if you are taking HRT, this will be mitigated to an extent. So what do you do about that from a practical standpoint? And something we do with a lot of our clients is have shorter, sharper workouts. Because like that, I tried to make this graph and I've just seen that I've moved it and now it doesn't really look great. But basically, you're going to have a reduced maximal recoverable volume. So you potentially want to have shorter workouts, sharper workouts, and you think kind of like stimulate, not annihilate. Now, as a kind of side note to this, one thing I've noticed is that it actually massively improves people's mood as well. These shorter, sharper, more frequent workouts. So there's kind of like a double benefit there. And then the application of this, a couple of things: do what you can to optimize recovery. Make sure that protein's on point, that calories are at the right point. If you are in a deficit, you're not in too big a deficit. Make sure that you're sleeping. Now, I realize this is often massively impacted as well, but do what you can to prioritize that. Secondly, shorter, sharper workouts are often better. Sometimes it's hard to get your head around the fact that more isn't better, but more is actually worse if you can't recover from it, right? So there is this point of like maximal recoverable volume. What can I actually recover and adapt to? And then like know that although it's harder, because some people kind of hear that like, oh, it's harder to build muscle during menopause, there's no point trying. It's a weird way to get your head around it, but there's actually more point trying, right? Like when it's harder, you need to try more because muscle is so important to healthy aging. So it's even more important that you're still doing these things. I am going to move on to fat loss during menopause, but was there any questions on this? I only exercise at home and get stronger using weights, but worry about injury through poor form. Any recommendations of online assistance with this? Well, you could join us and we can have a little look at your form. This is music to my ears. Shorter workouts, yes, please. Honestly, I love shorter workouts. I'm just going to bring on Tony here, who is our perimenopause expert. Talk to me about shorter workouts.
They are the answer to so many people's issues from a practical standpoint as well, when you're really busy. And I think just from the physicalities and changes that are happening to you, you're able to sustain the workout and the intensity for that amount of time to get the results that you want to get. The longer workouts, I find, fatigue me so by about 40 minutes in, I'm starting to wane anyway. So the quality of the workout is lessening. And also recovery, I don't tend to recover the same. My sleep quality is not the same as it was years ago. So this kind of addresses that all in one. So it allows me to be more consistent, which psychologically is more doable as well. So it ticks many boxes. And honestly, I don't notice a huge difference. If I was to say the shape that I'm in isn't, down to like how I really want it to be, that's purely because of my effort and the training, because I can't be bothered to perhaps do optimal training. That's all. Not because shorter workouts are affecting it.
What's interesting when you start doing short workouts, and I've done this by myself, not being perimenopausal, but just enjoying working, like honestly, just like the concentration span a little bit, is there's really not that much difference between the results that you get between like pretty good and optimal. Like you get like 80-90% of the results from being pretty good consistently versus being optimal. And the increased effort it takes to be optimal is massive, right? Like that difference between doing, a couple of shorter workouts a week or shorter workouts every other day and actually feeling good and recovering from that. And that's one of our key things, is like, how do we get people feeling good? The point isn't to annihilate people in the gym. It's like, how do we get you the right dose of exercise that will actually give you more energy? Because often what we're struggling with women who are perimenopausal is like lack of energy. It's the key things that people come to us with is reduced mood and lack of energy. That's what we want to help people with. Now, if you give them long workouts, you often make that even worse. But the right dose of exercise will actually give you more energy. And this is a really good question as well. Tony, thanks so much for that. I'm going to bring on Claire Tracy if she's here, because she is our performance expert. And hey, girl.
Hello.
I thought this question would be good for you because it's like, it's quite a hard question to answer specifically, but Claire works with a lot of athletes. So actually knowing how recovered you are is so, so important. And the question here, if you can't see it, is how do you know when you're recovered, or maybe what are signs of when you're not recovered?
So I think there's quite a few, and it's a part of this is knowing how you feel at your best. So sleep is one thing that if you're not recovered, that will be altered. So you will maybe not be able to get to sleep properly or stay asleep. It sounds weird because you feel like if you're not recovered, you'd probably want to sleep more, but it's not always the case. It could be that your DOMS, like delayed onset of muscle soreness, so the pain you get the day after, usually it may stay around for the second day. It may be worse on the second day, but if it's not disappearing after that, that could be something again that is a sign that you're just doing too much and not recovering. The intensity that you can do in your workout. So the goals that you set for yourself, whether it's prescribed loading or not, or RPE, loads that you've previously lifted that at your optimal feel good may not be feeling good again. So it may be that you have to reduce the loads. That could be another sign that you're not recovering properly. The
Yeah.
duration. Sorry, were you going to say something?
I was just agreeing. Like,
Yeah.
those are the main things, right? Like, I think normally the most obvious thing, and you can't tell straight away, but it's like
Yeah.
reduction in your mood, a reduction in your energy levels, often outside the gym, as opposed to necessarily inside the gym where you can kind of get amped up for a 20-30 minute workout. And normally it's your performance, right? Like, if consistently, because this is the other thing, everyone has good and bad days, and everyone wants to know, why is it that I could lift more last week and I can't lift as much this week? Sometimes that's literally just like, why is it raining today and it wasn't yesterday? Like, it's just like, not every single session is going to be a PB session. But if you're finding consistently that you're not able to do what you were able to do before, it's like, okay, well, you're not recovering well enough. But this is something that we monitor, and this is why we look at, we're tracking people, what people can lift, what weights they're lifting, and yeah, so we kind of keep an eye on that. A lot of good questions here about like, what do you mean by shorter? Is it Tabatas? Not always Tabatas, especially not if it's resistance training. More than happy after this to send people a few examples of shorter, sharper workouts. Yeah. How does that mean you do fewer sets? Oh, sorry, does that mean you do fewer sets? You could, it's one way to shorten a workout is instead of doing 3 sets, you do 2 sets. But we program them slightly different so that you're hitting kind of main body parts. But that's one way that absolutely does work for sure. Should you continue to lift the same weight when fatigued, or would you drop the weight and increase the sets? Depends why you're fatigued and what you're training for. Someone's saying no sound, but can everybody else hear me? And is that, no offense, Elaine, but is that an Elaine problem? Hopefully. Okay, right. I'm going to move on to the fat loss section of menopause. And then I'm going to pull on Maureen to help me with the section that I think is going to help a ton of people about mindset and actually knowing what to do but not doing it, which seems to be the most common thing that comes up for people. So fat loss during menopause, I've kind of already touched on this, but it is significantly harder even if it is the same thing, right? You still need to be in a deficit. There's nothing else going on. Like, it is still a calorie deficit, but that's not particularly helpful when you're really struggling with things, right? So these are kind of the key things that are impacting how hard it is to lose fat during menopause. One being low mood, another being low motivation. I would say they're probably the two key things. All of these kind of mix into each other, right? Because if you aren't sleeping, then your motivation's lower and your mood tends to be lower because you're not doing the things that you know you want to do to get the result. And you've got a lot of life stress. Like that seems, it's often a key point in life where, you know, just this perfect storm of finding stuff really hard because you might have like, you know, youngish or even teenage kids. Your parents are probably aging and maybe need a bit more of your support. You still have, you know, maybe you've got a partner, maybe you don't, whatever, but like that's a whole nother thing that you need to deal with. And then often you're kind of at an age where you're also quite senior in your career as well. So there's a lot of pressure coming from that side. And then suddenly you've got brain fog and you're struggling with symptoms and you're not sleeping as well and your body's changing, even though you don't feel like anything you've done has changed. And that's one of the things we really help people with. And then one thing I do want to touch on, I will talk about like exactly how much, is a lot of people think that because fat gain is a byproduct of menopause, it's menopause that's causing the fat gain. And it's more that the symptoms are making it harder. And there is a very small impact of a reduction in estrogen on your resting energy expenditure. But when I say very small, I can't remember the figure off the top of my head, but I do have it in this slide, in the next two slides. You know, it's to the point, I think what was it? 50 odd calories or something. So it has a very, very small impact, but still important to note so that when people do say, you know, this is why, you can be like, huh, but the magnitude of effect is quite small there. And actually it's much more to do with these lifestyle factors. Number one, primarily being sleep, which has this like insane impact on how hungry you are, even after one night, right? So this is a really cool study. It looked at having, and it was the same people. So you've got kind of like a better study design here. They had 8 hours sleep versus 4 hours sleep. And then they looked at habitually how much they ate the next day. And the people who only had 4 hours sleep ate 559 calories more. That's after one night. So when you think about someone who's struggling with, I mean, whether you're perimenopausal or not, a lot of people have sleep issues, right? If after just one night of poor sleep, you're eating 500 odd calories more the next day, think about that compounded over time, right? Like it has a really, really big impact. And I know that people kind of turn their nose up a little bit, like, oh yeah, like sleep's important, but really I need to nail my steps and my calories. And it's like, right, but the sleep is what's going to allow you to nail your steps and your calories. The sleep is what's going to make it much easier. And you don't want to make fat loss harder than it needs to be. So sometimes like the best thing you can do for fat loss is to set an alarm when you go to bed. Like we're all really bad at that. Like I'll hold my hands up and I'm horrendous at doing that. But you need to be like, if you're struggling with fat loss, this could be one of the key things is you need to set an alarm before you go to bed. Now you can get bogged down into the science of this and how it impacts insulin sensitivity. But the primary reason is that it impacts how much you eat the next day. So it impacts how hungry you are. It impacts your motivation levels. It impacts whether you're likely to go to the gym, whether you're likely to get your steps in. And knowing this helps for two reasons, right? And I always kind of want to caveat talking about this because if you're struggling with sleep, it's normally not because you've decided to struggle with sleep. Like apart from me, who like I fall asleep so quickly, I'm just an idiot and I tend to faff around in the evening so I don't get to bed till late. Like someone like me, I need to hear this. I need to be told to go to bed earlier. But if you're like, I do go to bed earlier, I do really try, I am doing all the right things and I still can't sleep, sometimes this knowledge makes you kind of more stressed about the fact you're not sleeping. But what it can do is if you have the odd night where you know you're not going to sleep very well or where you haven't slept very well for some reason, you can kind of know, right, this is a bit of a danger zone for overeating. What can I put in place to reduce that risk? Great example of this, I went to Venice this weekend, had to get up very early to get my flight. I was up at like 2:30 to get my flight, right? And I just did a full day. But I knew that was prime time for me to overeat, to not go to the gym, to not get my steps in. So I tried to set myself up for success by planning ahead, by not being like, do you know what? Tired Emma with low motivation is definitely going to opt to not go to the gym. What do I need tomorrow? A training partner so that I have to go, right? Or tired Emma's probably going to go for the easy option and not make, you know, a healthy, nutritious meal that actually fits her calories, right? So how can I put something in place that makes it easier for me to go to that option, right? Or how do I hold myself accountable? You know, I'll use the Commit to 6 group myself and be like, guys, this is what I'm doing today. I'm coming back and I'm going to tell you in the group that I've done it later on. You know, like we all use the group for that, like a bit of accountability of like, I've held myself accountable. And you'd be surprised how much that works. Claire Davies did a post the other day and I posted on, I really didn't want to go to the gym that day. And she was like, I want to see a photo of you in the gym tonight. And it's genuinely the only reason that I went. And did I have the best session in the world? No. But did I do significantly more than like, had I not even gone to the gym? Like, yes, right? So knowing these things gives you kind of the power to know that's when I'm most likely to fall off track. And that's when I might need the most support. And also I just think that study freaking blows my mind. Okay, so this was the other study I was talking about. Does menopause impact fat loss directly? So loss of muscle mass, even quite substantial loss of muscle mass, which now, because you all know about resistance training and you all know about shorter, sharper workouts and maximal recoverable volume, and you're going to reach out to us if you need any help, you're not going to struggle with. But if you did, for example, lose muscle mass during menopause, which most people do, and our whole kind of emphasis around some of this research, especially on Commit to 6, especially with our perimenopausal clients, is like, fuck average, right? Because the average person loses muscle as they age. The average person gains weight as they age. And so people read that and they're like, well, that's my fate because I can't stop aging. No. You don't have to be average. You don't have to be the average person. So this isn't going to happen to you. But if it did, then you're looking at the loss of muscle mass, reducing your resting energy expenditure, so the amount of calories that you require just to stay alive, by probably about 50 calories. And then the direct impact of a reduction in estrogen, which again would be attenuated by taking HRT and or resistance training, would be about another 50 calories, right? So it's not the reason that someone's putting on loads of fat. Like it's 100 calories. 100 calories doesn't really, and that's 100 calories at an extreme where you're not taking HRT and where you have lost quite a lot of muscle mass. So that would be like the direct impact of menopause on your energy balance and thus how hard it is to lose fat. But as I said, if you're resistance training and you're taking HRT, then you won't struggle with these things. We do work with a lot of women who can't take HRT for various reasons. And that's where we do need to think a little bit more about recovery, how to optimize these things, and making sure that we're doing everything that we can. And again, absolutely possible. Don't think just because you're not taking HRT that that you can't achieve these things. You absolutely can. I just want to quickly touch on this, which is what most people get wrong about menopause, and it's certainly not most people's fault. It's normally what they've been told on social media. One, thinking that everything needs to change and they need a completely different approach. They don't. It's usually overcomplicating things, and it usually ends in you putting a lot of effort into the wrong places. And like I said, we don't want to make fat loss harder than it needs to be. And two, that they need a special diet or exercise plan, or they can't do the things they enjoy anymore, or they need like a special supplement regime. And what's interesting, especially about the exercise plan, is you will find completely conflicting information from people. Like some people saying resistance training, some people saying you can't do that, you need to do cardio all the time. Some people saying you should never do cardio. Some people saying you should only do fasted cardio. Like it's just such a minefield of things. So I don't want you to get conned. Most menopause supplements have very, very weak evidence. And the truth is that people are marketing heavily towards menopausal women because they're an easy target, right? A lot of people are struggling. They're looking for a solution and they will try anything. I think most people have probably been in this position with something, right? I remember with my back, like as much as I'm such a sciencey geek and I'm so like evidence-based and I really want to know, I still paid for like random Chinese herbal medicine that someone was like, oh, it might work, or like paying a load for acupuncture with no evidence behind it, because you're like, if there's even a little bit of a chance it's going to work, I'm just going to try it. But do be aware that with menopausal supplements specifically, there is very weak to no evidence for these things. But I am about to come on to like what we can recommend and what there is evidence behind. But before I move on from this, if there is anything that you're thinking of buying, send it to me first. I have no affiliations with supplement companies. If I think it's going to work for you, I will 100% tell you to buy it, but I don't want you to waste your money on it. So do feel free to run it by me or Tony or any of the coaches. Would be more than happy to have a look for you. Okay, so this is what we do know. This is what we do have evidence for. And what you're going to notice is a lot of this is just general healthy eating advice, right? If you're looking for kind of like what's the optimal healthy diet, this is kind of it as well. All I would add to it is making sure that you're eating in line with your energy demands based on your goals, whether that's fat loss, maintenance, building muscle. So a Mediterranean style diet seems to be the healthiest diet. A reduction in processed foods, again, not, overly shocking. What's quite interesting is there is some research about reduced ultra processed foods and reduced perimenopausal symptoms. Now, I'm unsure whether that, because it was observational research, it's quite hard to tell whether that's like chicken or egg, right? So what you might find is that people who have more symptoms are more likely to emotionally eat on things like ultra processed foods or chocolate or pastries or whatever. It's unlikely you're going to comfort eat like broccoli and chicken and vegetables, and like you're more likely to overeat on the ultra processed or processed type foods. So there could be a bit of like chicken or egg there, but there is that link between people who experience less symptoms and people who have an improved diet. Again, primarily whole foods, not overly shocking. And then it's the basic supplements. Creatine may have an added benefit in terms of reduction in brain fog, improved bone mineral density, improved strength. And protein may be even more important because you have this anabolic resistance, which means you might need a little bit more protein. Interestingly, most people eat less protein, but you probably need a bit more, or you would certainly benefit from a little bit more. And then, as we've already spoken about, exercise becomes even more important because you're at this heightened risk of muscle mass loss. That is what all of the research, that's it. That is the evidence-based guidelines on what would be optimal for someone going through perimenopause. So don't get conned by people trying to sell you stuff. Now, I'm going to open to any questions here. Maureen, do you want to come on and collate a few?
Yeah, I have some very good questions here. So the information about menopause or perimenopause, does that apply for postmenopause as well? Or is it different?
All of this, I'm just trying to think if there's anything I said that wouldn't. What you'll tend to find is that symptoms are worse during perimenopause when your hormones are fluctuating more. So what people often find is that they have much less symptoms, so they struggle much less postmenopause. And it does also depend on your HRT status as well. So if you're taking HRT, then some of this stuff would be like, at least you're going to like mitigate some of the negatives of these things.
Mm-hmm. Somebody said when you were talking about the perimenopause, are you saying fat loss is harder due to psychological rather than physiological?
Not necessarily, because I mean, you could argue that the lack of sleep is physiological as well. I'm saying it's more to do with the symptoms rather than like menopause itself. Like what I don't want people to think is like, as soon as you're in this bracket of I'm going through perimenopause, it's like everyone experiences that differently. Everyone experiences different symptoms. And it's much more to do with the symptoms that you're experiencing and how they impact your behaviors than it is to do. But I'm not saying it's all in your head. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What dose of creatine for perimenopause? I've heard that a higher dose is better.
Yes, you can take up to about 1 gram per. No, why am I thinking that one? Because sometimes I get between grams wrong. Basically, if you were 60, 0.1, this is what I got wrong once, right? 0.1 grams per kilogram body weight, right? So if you're 60 kilograms, you could take 6 grams. And you might benefit, this is true, like what you've said here, you might benefit from taking a little bit more. If you don't deal with that particularly well, like something's better than nothing, right? So most people will do really well with like 3 to 5 grams of creatine. But with perimenopausal women, you may benefit from taking a little bit more. And so the research suggests that like up to sort of 1 gram per, 0.1 grams per kilogram body weight.
I had another few questions here. So a few people have mentioned about HRT causing fat gain, or does it make it harder to lose fat when on HRT?
Most people find it much easier to lose fat when on HRT because of the reduction in symptoms.
Okay.
But and what I will say about that is getting the right dose of HRT can be very hard, and you're kind of going back and forth with your doctor and stuff. And sometimes you have things like water retention or increased hunger, or it impacts you in certain ways. So it's not always quite like that simple. Same with like hypothyroidism. I was speaking to someone earlier who I think is here, or they said they were coming to the workshop. And if it's medicated right, it shouldn't impact your basal metabolic rate. It shouldn't impact your energy expenditure. It shouldn't impact your fat loss. It's very hard to get it medicated right? And not often like it's medicated right for a period of time, and then something changes and you need to change the medication, and that has side effects. You become very fatigued for a period of time. So it's not quite as simple as saying that, but yes, if medicated at the right dose, then it should help, not hinder.
There was a really good question that we missed there a while ago, which is menopausal 5 foot tall woman, undiagnosed ADHD, and use food to deal with overwhelm and hyperfocus. On HRT, fairly lean, train 5 days a week and have a great coach. Just can't nail the food thing. Just end up binging when under periods of work stress when I really need to focus. Also the dreaded memo belly. Meno. Help.
I feel like that's one for you, babe.
Yeah, well,
and also, I'm going to go for a wee.
Okay, you have fun. Make sure you wash your hands.
Okay, well, I'm also
So with ADHD, it can make things way harder. And I have ADHD as well, so does Emma. Not menopausal though yet. But I don't think people actually who don't have ADHD actually realize, well, you can't possibly realize how fucking hard it is. Excuse my French, but oh my god, it makes things so hard. So when it comes to, so you've got a few things going on there, like you're using food to comfort eat or to deal with difficult emotions. Okay, so you're using food to deal with stress and when you need to focus. So food can give us like this dopamine hit, a bit of comfort. But if that's your only go-to coping mechanism, then it's going to make things really hard as it is without having the added extra of ADHD being so hard. So it's difficult without ADHD, but then put ADHD on top of that, it can make it like 10 times more intense. Now, 10 times is not like an exact figure. That's just me plucking a number out of thin air, but it makes it way harder, okay? So what I would say is try not to be so hard on yourself, but definitely if you know that, okay, under immense periods of stress that I tend to go for food, like it's great that you have that awareness. Now that you know that, what could you put in place instead of using food? Like what else would help you de-stress? Like what emotion or what are you trying to get from the food? You're feeling really stressed, you're trying to feel a sense of calm or relaxedness. What else could you do that would help you get that sense of calm or relaxedness that isn't using food? So definitely having a sense of self-awareness around what's happening, but again, trying not to be hard on yourself when you have, like, if you're struggling with menopause or if you have ADHD. Know that it's not a you problem. You've just got extra considerations to take into consideration. That wasn't very grammatically correct, was it?
No, I think you said that. It's also so common for women when they go through menopause or perimenopause to struggle with things that they've struggled with previously. So often we find like reoccurrence of binge eating, even though it's not been a problem for a long time. Often we find that, you know, a lot of women have been masking ADHD for their whole lives, and then they get a diagnosis because there's other stuff going on. And even like things like depression tends to like rear its head again. Like these, if there's something underlying that maybe like, you know, very resilient, streamline you that doesn't have anything else to deal with can manage, often this is a time when it becomes a hell of a lot harder and actually you struggle with those symptoms significantly more. So we do see a lot of women who are just getting diagnosed with ADHD going through perimenopause because of that reason, because it becomes kind of like heightened, or maybe they were able to deal with it a lot easier previously. And now that they've got all these symptoms and things to deal with and fluctuating hormone levels, it becomes much harder. Andrea, been so nice to have you and so excited to have you on Commit 6. So we will see you shortly. I think we're going to be using a lot of this on Commit 6. Sorry, but I know this is freaking awesome, right?
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah.
It's so cool to see everybody like getting involved and asking questions and having their input. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well done, guys. You're doing great in the comments.
Yeah, I'm loving this. We'll definitely do more of these.
Yeah.
Okay, good question. How many grams of protein per day? Like I said, you'll probably benefit from a little bit more, up to probably about 2 grams per kilogram body weight. That's often very hard for people to hit. So what we normally set as like a minimum target for people is let's try and get 100 grams in. Anything more is great, is even better, but as a minimum, 100 grams. And we want you to split that up throughout the day. So like 25 grams plus at each meal, and you're not going to be far off that. And then if you get a bit more in, like even better. But basically the reason that it's more important during perimenopause is that you have this anabolic resistance that occurs as you age, where you need a little bit more stimulus to maximize that muscle protein synthesis response. So you benefit from a little bit more protein.
A really good question came in there a while ago. Sorry, just to butt in, because I like to do that. It was, let me find it.
Oh, you already answered this one. Alex, any creatine monohydrate?
Yeah. So it was, oh my God, why can't I find it? But somebody was basically asking, oh yeah, if you have a lot of muscle but also a lot of fat, will you still live longer than someone who has less muscle? I thought that was a good question.
If you have a lot of muscle but still a lot of fat, will you live longer than someone who has less muscle?
Correct.
Yeah. The evidence would suggest yes. And also on top of that, and I would say this is probably a more important consideration to make, is fitness is a much better predictor of health, longevity, how long you live, living disease-free, than BMI. Fitness would be a much better thing to be looking at than BMI. Now, obviously, it's slightly harder to look at. The reason that most people use BMI is because it's really easy to measure. All you need is your height and your weight, right? So when doctors are looking at like large scale, what goes on in the population, it's very easy to look at BMI. It's very hard to get an accurate fitness test from everybody. But actually, fitness is the best predictor that we have. So even if all you think about is, how do I improve my fitness? If you're someone who's like, I'm just sick of yo-yo dieting. I'm sick of thinking about my diet. Like I just want to focus, can't look at that anymore. And I want to improve my health. And I know that it's important for me to age well. Focus on your fitness, because the fat loss will come as a byproduct, but it's such a healthier, happier way to do that.
When you say fitness, do you mean cardiovascular fitness? It's just asked there.
Well, so studies on this have been done in numerous ways. There's even a study that shows that people who can do the most push-ups live the longest. So you could look at that would be obviously like a kind of strength endurance type thing. But again, most of the research, rightly or wrongly, has actually been done with cardiovascular fitness, because it's kind of like one of the easiest things to measure, or one of the most frequent things to measure.
And then while we're on the talk of cardio, how does cardio fit into fat loss? Is there a way to quote unquote boost the deficit?
Yeah, you're doing quite a lot of cardio at the moment, aren't you?
I'm doing 30 minutes of like steady state cardio in one session, and then I'm doing like 5 minutes of HIIT at the end of another session, and that's like on top of my like step target, so that's not included in my step goal, so I have to get my like step target, and then the cardio is like an extra expenditure. So yeah, it's helpful.
Yeah, just quickly, because we're very bad at selling Commit 6, but if you want to sign up to Commit 6, you can sign up to Commit 6 for Monday. Go to esgfitness.co.uk/commit. I think, and Maureen might be more up to date on this than I am, but I think when I checked this morning, we had about 34 spaces left to start on Monday. We're not bullshitting you here. Like, that is just genuinely how many people we have left. There are only so many coaches. We do one-to-one check-ins on Commit to Six. So there are genuinely only so many spaces. It's not unlimited amount of spaces. So if you want to get signed up, get signed up. If you want to talk to us beforehand, just reach out to us on any platforms. And then probably the best thing you can do, and I know that I've got maybe about like, I think 20 by this point, applications to go through. But if you go on to the website, esgfitness.co.uk, and fill in the application form, what we really like is you to tell us a little bit about you. This is what I'm struggling with. This is what I need help with. Is this a good fit? And genuinely, if it's not, we will send you to somebody who we think will be a better fit. We refer a lot of people. But if we think that we're the best people to help you, then we'll be really excited to have you. Re-cardio, totally agree. Like, I think some people think you need to do cardio. You don't. You need to be in a deficit. If you want to make that deficit a little bit bigger when it comes to fat loss through doing a bit of cardio, great. Like, add in a bit of cardio. You certainly don't have to. The other thing to consider, because people get really like fixated on like steps versus cardio. If you're like, oh, I don't know, I've injured my ankle, I can't do the steps. Okay, well, can you be on a bike so there's less impact on your ankle, and then we can expend some energy like that? It doesn't have to be steps, right? There's nothing like magic about steps. So yeah, you can do some cardio, and this is often something we do in the winter, especially with most of our clients being in the UK. It's either cold, dark, and horrible, or potentially in some places not safe to go out at night walking around. So yeah, like jump on your spin bike or go to the gym and do a bit of cardio. Or if you're like, I just really don't enjoy walking, but I don't mind doing a bit on the bike or going on the cross trainer, then that's fine.
Few questions there about Commit to Six if you want to go over them.
All right then. Okay, yes, I will. Sorry, I got distracted by this question, which I love because I love postprandial walking. Is there an optimal window after eating to walk? Ideally, as soon as possible. And the benefit of it being walking is that obviously you're not going to like hopefully feel too sick, but it really just helps with digestion. But what you want to avoid is this big glucose spike after eating. So when you're walking, you're using your muscles, you clear blood glucose quicker. So ideally, yeah, go out for a walk like basically straight after dinner, and ideally about 30 minutes. But again, imperfect action, something is better than nothing. So if you're like, I can only do 10 minutes, fine, do 10 minutes. It's better than nothing. Okay, quick fire. Do you need Commit 6? Oh, sorry, do you need Facebook to join Commit 6?
No.
Well done. Correct answer. Lisa, I'm on Commit 6. It's an amazing community, so much support for everyone. All the coaches go the extra mile. I was on Commit 6 and then got diagnosed with breast cancer. I stayed on and had such wonderful support, and I'm now back to full strength with the help of them and the team. We freaking love you, Lisa. Oh, and we have good banter too. Hopefully. Amanda signed up, which is awesome. Facebook's not needed. Can you send the short workout examples? Yes, message me after this. I'd be happy to send them. It's amazing. I joined at the beginning of the year, but had a bereavement, so couldn't keep going. Feel ready again now. Oh, Stephanie, we would love to have you back. Did Commit 6 and lost 2.5 stones, 15 kilograms in about 10 months. That's incredible. Which I put on after an ACL injury, and I barely noticed I was dieting. Can't recommend enough. That's exactly what we want. Living your life to the fullest while getting results. Okay, I work from home currently. I have only walked 2,000 steps a day. Hate it. We'll be going for a walk in a bit. Kat, I'm with you, right? Like I've been writing this most of the day, of which we've barely got through any. So we'll come back and do some more at some point. And I've not done very many steps either. So I'm going to hold us accountable. I'm going for a walk after this as well. Rebecca signed up. Awesome. If you don't need Facebook for Commit 6, what platforms, etc., will you need access to, please? Or is it specially designed space for the program? Also, thank you so much for this session. It's been great. So we use Mighty Networks basically because loads of people hated Facebook. And it's nice because it's different. Honestly, it's kind of like Facebook, but a bit better, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's like your own little, this is our little place. Nobody else can get in sort of vibe. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. Right. Sophie says, are you covering mindset tonight? So yeah, all right.
All right, then.
Oh, almost like I had that planned.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, so I'm going to keep Maureen on for this because she's excellent at this stuff. But in fact, we both could and have spent hours and hours and hours, if not I've probably spent days worth of podcasts talking about this stuff. And so there was so much on mindset we could have covered, but I thought that this was probably the key problem that most people struggle with, which is I do know what to do. By the way, if you don't know what to do, it's that part for us as coaches is very simple. There's kind of two parts to coaching, right? Telling someone, based on their goals and what they've struggled with in the past and, any constraints that they have, and if they're perimenopausal or they've got PCOS or if they're struggling with binge eating, whatever, the knowing what to do or like the telling you what to do is actually quite easy for us as coaches. It's the getting you to do that consistently. That's the art of coaching, right? That's the hard bit. That's the psychological bit. Like that's really why people are here. Because the telling, like, if you just read enough of my social media posts or Maureen's or any of the coaches, like you'll know what to do conceptually, but actually doing it, that's where it's really hard. And when you think a little bit deeper into why this is, and I'm sure that Maureen will have a slightly different stance on this, so I'm interested to hear what she says as well. But partly just because like this is what I've been thinking about today. But the reason that most people don't stick to things when you really boil it down to the core is that they don't fully believe that they're capable of the outcome. Because I truly believe that most people want it enough. I don't think that people are lazy. I think, they'll invest their time, their money, their effort into it. But they always kind of have like one foot out of the door and they're not fully willing to commit 100%. Like there's a reason Commit 6 uses the word commit. I think it's so important to fully commit to something. And that's actually why they're not getting results. And when you get to this kind of like key realization that most people don't get results because they don't fully commit, and they don't fully commit because they don't believe that they can do it. And the reason that then they won't fully commit is because then they want to protect themselves from the pain of failing, right? This happens in all areas of life. It's not just like a fat loss thing. It's like, I don't know, if I was launching a new business and I kind of only half-assed the marketing a little bit because I'm like, well, if it doesn't work, I don't want to have been like telling everyone it's this big amazing thing and then it not work out. So I'm not fully committed to it because I don't fully believe in it, which means that inevitably I actually don't get the result that I want, and then I kind of confirm that belief. So with a lot of people we work with, they've been doing that with dieting for a long time, right? They've been half committing to a diet, only half trying, and then confirming that story that they say in their head of like, fat loss never works for me or diets never work for me. And it doesn't work because you don't fully commit to it. And then you're telling that negative story in your head, and then you're giving more evidence to that story, and that story becomes a reality to you. And then it's really hard to break down. And that's really what we do on Commit to 6, right? And it doesn't happen overnight, but we need to change that mindset, that belief you have in your head that you're not able to do this, because you are completely capable. You're completely capable of this with the right support. And the first step is making like small promises and embracing that imperfect action and saying you're going to show up for yourself, showing up for yourself, and giving yourself that credit for showing up for yourself. So yeah, that's kind of what I had to say on that. And also that like you get to decide that this time is going to be different. And you get to decide that you are quote unquote ready to fully commit, right? Like you get to decide that, because it's not just going to happen for you, right? If you're going in thinking that you're going to give up anyway, you'll be looking for excuses, and you will find them, because there is always an excuse, right? If you're looking for an excuse, you'll find it. The key to successful dieting is, in my opinion, resilience. And it's deciding that you're not going to give up when you go in. Okay, no matter what happens, even if there's days where it doesn't work out, even if there's days I do overeat, even if there's days I feel like giving up, I'm not going to give up. And that's what we ask people to commit to at the start of Commit to 6, is not to give up, not to do anything perfectly, right? The whole mantra is imperfect action. It's not about that. It's not about like, you need to commit to this many workouts a week or this step target or this whatever. You need to commit to the process, to us as coaches, that you are going to reach out if you're struggling, because we're all really good, right? But we're not mind readers. So we can't tell, right? The commitment is, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to look for solutions, not excuses. and I'm going to reach out to my coach. I'm going to be coachable. Because if you do that, you genuinely can't fail. Like, this will work. It does work. You are completely capable of your goals. It's just sometimes you need that support. And often the difference between successful dieting and another failed attempt isn't like the magic calorie number, it isn't the amount of carbs you're eating, it isn't having a specific workout plan. It's reassurance, it's support, it's a pep talk at the right time, it's knowing someone's got your back, it's the accountability that you get from having a coach that wants the best from you and having a community of people that all want the best for you. That's what makes it different. That's what makes it successful this time, as opposed to the time you've done it before. That's my pep talk.
So I totally agree with everything that you've just said there. But to add to that, I think the reason that people have low self-belief is because they have given themselves evidence in the past that I can't stick to a diet. I can't do this. But the reasons you haven't that's not, like, what am I even saying today? The reason you haven't stuck to things before is, yes, because you've like one foot in, one foot out, and you're not fully committing to it. But it's also because you've tried absolute bullshit diets, which I'm not saying is your fault. It's not your fault. The like, social media is riddled with absolute shite that is brainwashing you into thinking that, oh, I need to do this, I need to replace all my meals with shakes if I want to lose fat, or I have to cut everything that I like out of my diet if I want to lose fat, or I have to go on really low calorie diets. And the thing about it is like, you've tried all these things and you think, oh, I know what to do, but I just can't do it. Sorry, you don't actually know what to do, because you're doing all the wrong things, and you're doing all the wrong things, which is making you feel like a failure because you're not able to stick to them, because they're not actually set up in a way that they can be stuck to anyway. So everyone is going to be set up to fail on them long term. But now you have told yourself that, oh, it must be a me problem. I'm the one that's the failure because I can't stick to this. No, you're not. You're trying to stick to something that's absolutely ridiculous anyway. So now you have this belief in yourself that I can't do it. But yes, you absolutely can, but you just need to be shown the right way that's actually enjoyable. You can live your life at the same time, and you don't actually feel like you're on a diet. And then you can completely transform your whole life. And like, we have Jill here, who is a great example of this. Somebody else, was it Stephanie? Who else said that they have been here before, didn't even feel like they were dieting? That's what we want for you. And that's why we have called this the No Bullshit Fat Loss Workshop, because we are allergic to all of the shite that is on social media. And there's so much of it, and it's very hard and it's very confusing for you to know what you actually listen to. And we are trying to bridge the gap and be those people that can give you solid advice that is backed by evidence, and where you don't have to put your life on hold, and where you can feel your absolute best and achieve your goals at the same time.
God, that was good. Oh, right. Like, no pressure, Claire, but got anything to add?
Hi guys. Yeah, a couple of things. I did a post about this a few days ago, and then I did another one today. So particularly for women, we are notorious for putting ourselves at the bottom of the pile. If you have kids, if you don't have kids, just as women, we hold so much mental load, and we just put so much other stuff before our own needs. So we put ourselves to the bottom of the pile. So we don't keep our own promises. You know what you need to do, but you're like, I don't have time. I have to do X, Y, and Z instead. And what you have to like realize is that you are your most important person, because you have to be with you all the time, right? And you have to be able to give to all of those other people in your life. And if you keep putting yourself at the bottom of the pile, I think this is quite a cliche phrase, but you are going to be pouring from an empty cup, and you have to stop doing that. You need to learn to treat yourself with the same respect that you extend to everybody else in your life. If you make promises to your kids, you probably don't break them very often. If you make promises to your partner, you probably don't break them very often. So stop breaking your own promises and start keeping them, and start doing the stuff that you know you need to do. But we will support you with that, like 100%, because it's not easy to do. It takes time to unpick that. And the other thing as well is like planning and preparation is really key. If you leave stuff to chance all the time, it ain't gonna fucking happen. So you've got to like plan and prep and set yourself up for success. And again, like much easier said than done, but that's why having a good coach who's got your back, who's going to do all of the things that Emma was talking about, all of the things that Maureen was talking about is so, so important, because we can help you unpick all of these things and put these things in place.
Wow, that was also freaking great. Going to go over a few more questions here. Maureen, have you seen any? By the way, guys, you're all fucking incredible. Have you seen any? What about people not on HRT, full hysterectomy, so no hormones? Yeah, we work with actually quite a few people who have had full hysterectomies. And then the question would really be like, what are you struggling with? In particular, what's your goal at the moment? We treat everyone as individuals. So if you're perimenopausal, if you've got PCOS, if you've got we don't put you in a bracket of this. It's okay, what are you struggling with in regards to this? Good point here, actually having Claire here. So Claire is also a midwife, and the same principles apply, right? You're not just like, oh, you're a pregnant woman, do this. It's like, okay, what how do you feel in your first trimester? How do you feel in your second trimester? How are you feeling after giving birth? Like, it's always the person first. Okay, goal being fat loss. Yeah, Alison or Watson. I'm assuming your name is Alison Watson, not Watson Alison, but who knows, right? We would be more than happy to help you, no matter what your name is. Tessa, I did have the 3-to-1 method to go over, but I'm not gonna lie, I've kind of run out of time. So if you want to message me after, I'd be more than happy to show you. That's basically the approach you come up with, which means that you don't have to track calories and you have this kind of perfect balance between over restriction of meal plans, but a lot of structure, and the flexibility of flexible dieting, but actually way too much flexibility and way too much decision fatigue. So we've kind of created this middle ground. And it works very, very well, I have to say. I'm so excited to have so many people here, and also I love this platform. It's so good, and we're definitely going to do more of these, and definitely we'll be doing these on Commit 6 to get more people involved with the podcast and with questions. Thoughts on protein bars, as there seems to be ultra processed, good or bad, to eat regularly to increase protein? Maureen, what do you think?
I prefer to try and get people to increase their whole food consumption first, rather than trying to go for protein bars. So a very simple way to increase your protein is, let's just say you're having chicken as your protein source at your meal, but you're having maybe 100 grams of chicken. Simply just increase that portion size to maybe 120 grams or 150 grams. That is the easiest way for you to increase your protein intake. Yes, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a protein bar from time to time. If you're having them as like your only source of protein, not ideal. If you're having them like every day and you're noticing that, oh, I'm actually getting like gastro problems, it's more than likely the protein bars. So really try and get them through whole foods first. But again, underrated tool is to simply just increase the size of the protein you're having at your meal and go from there.
Awesome. There are a few people that say they're waiting to hear back from application forms. I will be getting back to all of those. Don't worry about anything. If anyone wants to talk to me about Commit 6, just head over to esgfitness.co.uk and then /commit if you're ready to sign up, or you want to read more about the program, or if you want to talk to me first, fill in the application form there, and I will get back to you all. Thanks for the whole team for this. Very helpful. Appreciated that you go out your time to do this. We fucking love it. Claire, what do you have for breakfast that isn't eggs?
Me? I eat a lot. It is a bit boring, but I do eat a lot of like Greek yogurt with a bit of granola and fruit. I also like to make stuff with oats sometimes and a little scoop of protein powder. Like if I need to prep stuff, that's quite good. I do like overnight oats or a baked oats thing. But I do also eat a lot of eggs.
I love eggs. I know a few people have asked us, like, how do you get in protein as a vegetarian? Actually, not that hard. I was very, very briefly a vegetarian. Yeah, and actually didn't find it that hard at all because you've got dairy and because you've got eggs. It's not so bad. I also ate a lot of tofu, which can actually be done very well. But the next question is as a vegan, and it is a lot harder as a vegan. Not impossible at all, but it is a little bit harder. You need to be thinking about it a little bit more, and also making sure that the protein sources that you're using are complementing each other, so you get a full amino acid spectrum. But absolutely doable, and we can definitely help you. Thanks everyone for being so freaking lovely.
Everyone's just pumped.
I know, right? This is exactly what I needed as well. Was not having a good day, and now I'm feeling freaking great. So it's been awesome to have you all. We'll stick around for 5 more minutes if anyone has any questions, and then yeah, feel free to reach out to us with any questions about anything or how we can help you. And we would absolutely love to. And I'll make sure that you're all kept up to date with the next ones as well. Anything that you guys want to say, oh look, here's us all here. We genuinely, like, all of the coaches. Katie unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, but she was really gutted to miss it. Oh, and you can actually use that QR code if it's big enough to scan. That will take you straight there. But we just really want to help as many people as possible. Like, it's such a nice family. We want to have the biggest impact on people. This is so much more than just fat loss. It's really about feeling your best and enjoying your life to the fullest. And that's the real impact that we want to have. And yeah, we want to attract people that are of that vibe and are like, you know what, fuck average. Life is short, and I'm up for feeling my best.
We just got Garamila Mahagav. Somebody up the Irish. Hilary Fitzgibbon. What's the crack? That's
Sorry,
thank
what?
you very much in Irish. Garamila Mahagav.
What does that mean?
Is that what that means?
Thanks very much. Yeah.
Oh, thanks very much.
Yeah. Thanks a million, really. Garamila, Sheila.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Go on, have a go at saying that there, Emma.
Go rapaha maile mayatsaha agapakadika. Yeah.
Why didn't I take out my phone?
Well, good news, this is recorded. I'm so glad that I'm not Irish and dyslexic. I think that's very unfair for Irish
The majority of the Irish, we can't even speak our own language, so it doesn't matter.
Want to talk through that one, Claire?
So I would have a look at, firstly, are you eating enough in the morning? What are you doing in the afternoon that's like pushing you to overeat? I think you guys touched on it before, didn't you? When you were talking about fasting, but like, if you're not eating enough in the morning, you are gonna get hungry in the afternoon, and then and the hunger almost like what's the word, like compounds, and then it feels really, really hard to have any control over that and make sensible decisions. So firstly, make sure that you're eating enough in the morning. Secondly, what do you do in the afternoon? Is there a period where you're like at work and you find like, oh God, I just need to graze to get me through this next bit? In which case, maybe set alarms on your phone to take like short 5-minute breaks where you could go and have a snack, maybe fruit or something, or just like get up and have a walk around and give your brain a rest, and then come back to your desk and reset. And like, you won't then hopefully constantly be thinking about food.
Yeah, agree. And honestly, I know it seems so obvious, and you're probably like, that's too obvious for it to work, but the obvious stuff usually does work. Make sure you're eating enough. And I get that sometimes what often happens is you're like, I'm not really that hungry until this point that I massively overeat. And it's like, well, you probably are, but you're not used to eating at that time now because you're restricting so much, and your ghrelin levels, like your hunger hormones, have kind of normalized to not eating at that part of the day. And then when you do eat, you're like, oh my God, I'm really hungry. And I was speaking to Jordan about this today because he normally doesn't eat until lunchtime. And he said he had a protein shake this morning and he was like, Emma, I'm so hungry. Like, Like, he stopped and we got a wrap, standard Jordan. And then when we had coffee, he got a pastry as well. And he's like, he would normally never eat till lunchtime. But he's like, as soon as I started eating, I was just so hungry. And this often happens here where it's like, actually, when you don't eat anything, you kind of almost convince yourself you're not hungry. And as soon as you start eating, it becomes quite like uncontrolled. Whereas actually, if you'd just broken those meals up and you'd had snacks and then you'd stopped eating, or, you know, you'd had a meal and then you'd stopped eating, you would have found it a hell of a lot easier. So trust us on this. And Christina, I will say that this is something that really helps having a coach with, because you will question yourself. And like I was saying about like the reassurance at the right time, it does make such a big difference.
I would also think about, is there like an underlying emotion that's pushing you to overeat? Like, are you bored? Are you stressed? Are you tired? Are you upset about something? And then address it from that point of view as well.
Yeah, I agree. And also the language here, right? Because you're like, and then I can't stop. You absolutely can. What you need to do is just do it once and prove to yourself, and then do it again and prove to yourself, right? So sometimes what we'll do with clients who, for example, are like, oh, as soon as I have chocolate, I just massively overeat. We kind of create situations where they can't massively overeat, right? So this weekend, you're going to go out with your mum and you're going to have a coffee and you're going to have a piece of chocolate cake, right? Or like a whatever, something chocolatey. You can't overeat because there's no more there, right? And you're out, and then you're doing something else with your mum. You know, you're creating a situation where it's almost impossible to overeat. So actually, then you start to realize, I'm not the problem. It's me in relation to the situation, right? In relation to the environment. It's always the two things. And when you can kind of pull the two apart, you're like, it is possible for me. Now I just need to know how to do that, or learn how to do that, or relearn how to do that in this environment. So maybe it's the work environment, or maybe it's when you're sat at home and like realistically you could go back to the kitchen and get more food. So you develop the trust in an environment where it's very hard to do that behavior. And then you kind of bring that back into other situations, and then you're much less likely to overeat because you've built that trust in yourself that, hey, I can have a piece of chocolate and then not overeat afterwards. Maureen, what about this?
When I'm on it, I am on it. But when I fall off, then it all goes tits up. So I would say, when you're on it, are you being like really restrictive? Do you have like really rigid rules that there's no flexibility? And then is it a case of when you make one small mistake or slip up that you're like, oh, well, I fucked it now and I might as well just go ham? That generally happens, where it's like very much swings and pendulums, like really quote unquote good, and then it's like, oh, fuck it, tits up. So we need to try and find that gray area where you have a bit of balance, and you know that, yes, I think that might be my problem. Yeah. So knowing that you don't have to be perfect, you know, Emma's saying imperfect action, hashtag you can buy her t-shirt soon.
You can buy it now on the website.
Oh, and you still have to send me one. Sorry. Anyway.
Island. No, I think I did. It might be on its way.
Never mind. But yeah, Kat, we need to just try and find the middle ground, okay? Like, rather than swinging from one side of the pendulum to the other, it's like, okay, I might have went over a small bit, but again, this is why we use ranges. It's like, okay, I'm within a range here. I might have overeaten a small bit, or I mightn't have been perfect, but that's okay. I don't have to be perfect. I can just pick up where I left off and continue doing the things, because you're not a robot. You are human. We all make mistakes, and that's the crack.
And that's the crack. Okay, guys, I freaking love that. Thank you all so much for your time and for your attention, and the coaches for showing up and giving the most amazing input. We'll be back with more of these, and we're so excited for this intake. Like, if you think this vibe was good, like the Commit 6 vibe is just freaking awesome. Everyone's there supporting each other. We all want the best for you. It's just, yeah. I always fall into a rut with meal planning by just doing the same all of the time, then get bored and give up. How flexible are the foods you have on Commit 6? We don't do meal plans, but we do the 3-to-1 method, which is this perfect balance, as I said, between flexibility and structure. So you'll have some structure and some flexibility. And honestly, that's usually what people need too much flexibility isn't good. Too much structure isn't good. So if you want to talk to us about that, and I also have like a kind of free explanation of that as well. So message me on Instagram afterwards. I'd be more than happy to send it to you. And again, thank you all. You're all freaking incredible. Bye.
Bye.